I have the ability to distinguish between good and bad people. Good people smell sweet, bad people smell foul. But that notoriously cruel and tyrannical emperor, he smells bitter. When no one was looking, I secretly slipped him several sweet cakes. Holding the cakes, he said coldly, "The last person who gave me sweets wanted me dead. What about you?" I replied, "I want you to have sweetness and joy, and live a long, healthy life." I am the only daughter of the Minister of Rights. Since childhood, I've had this ability to tell good from evil. My nose is different from others. I can smell the scent on people. Good people smell sweet. Bad people smell foul. Father said if others knew of this ability, it would surely bring disaster. So I rarely went out and seldom spoke to anyone. It wasn't until I came of age that my parents realized not only my nose was unusual, my mind was different too. The doctor said I have a childlike mind. I didn't fully understand, but I suppose it means I'm a bit simple. From then on, my parents no longer kept me confined at home. They hired a tutor for me and even took me out for outings. I was absolutely overjoyed. Lon, remember, if you ever smell someone who stinks, don't tell anyone else. Wait until we're home and quietly tell your father and me. Every time we go out, your father reminds me again and again. Today was no different, but today was also different. Mother said that today is His Majesty the Emperor's Longevity Festival, and officials of the 4th rank and above may bring their families to the palace to offer birthday congratulations. I know of His Majesty the Emperor. A few days ago, when I went with Mother to the opera house, I overheard some people discussing him. Much of what they said I can't quite recall, but I remember one thing clearly. His Majesty the Emperor is an exceptionally wicked man. Then he must smell exceptionally foul. To test this theory, while everyone knelt with bowed heads to welcome him, I deliberately lifted my head and took a sniff. Perhaps because no one else dared to look up, my gaze easily met his from across the crowd. It wasn't what I expected. He didn't stink. In fact, he was extraordinarily handsome as an immortal from a painting. Before I could think further, Father hastily pulled me down, making us both prostrate on the ground in fearful reverence. I knew I had made another mistake. Before we left home, Father had told me not to look directly at His Majesty the Emperor, though I didn't understand why. I thought if someone was good looking, you ought to look at them more. Just like the flowers in my courtyard, I loved gazing at them every day. His Majesty the Emperor didn't scold me, nor did he blame Father. What those people said about him wasn't true. He wasn't a bad person, but he wasn't a good person either. I couldn't smell any foul odor on him, nor any fragrance. It was strange, but Father wouldn't let me keep sniffing. He stuffed a pile of sweet cakes into my arms and had Mother take me to stroll in the garden. The palace garden was much larger than the one at home. Besides many flowers I had never seen before, there were also numerous rockeries, perfect for hide and seek. While Mother was exchanging pleasantries with the madams, I hugged my sweet cakes and slipped into the rockeries. Either I was too good at hide and seek, or Mother was too clumsy. She couldn't find me for the longest time. Instead, I stumbled upon His Majesty the Emperor. He stood behind a rockery, the cool moonlight spilling over him. It made him look even more striking. I thought if the moon immortal from storybooks were a man, he would surely look just like this. Across from him stood a delicate young woman who trembled as she spoke. "Your Majesty, whatever you desire, your subject is willing to give." "Oh, and what do I desire?" His Majesty the Emperor chuckled. The woman replied, "If your Majesty would take your subject as Empress, the Li clan would prioritize your wishes above all else." They spoke at length, but I couldn't quite make out their words, nor could I fully understand them. After the woman turned to leave, His Majesty suddenly spun around and looked straight at me. He was cleverer than Mother. He found me in an instant. "Your Majesty, how did you know I was hiding here?" I hopped out from behind the rockery, tilting my head with a bright smile. His handsome brow furrowed slightly as he strode toward me. Only when he drew near did I catch the scent on him. It wasn't a foul odor, nor was it fragrant. It was a faint bitterness, like the most bitter medicine the doctor prescribed last time I fell ill. His Majesty the Emperor stepped before me, studying me for a moment. Finally, he asked in a calm tone, "Are you Minister Shin's daughter, Lana Shin?" I nodded, still staring up at him. Why did he smell bitter? Before he could speak again, I couldn't help but ask, "Your Majesty, have you ever eaten candy?" He seemed taken aback by my sudden question, pausing briefly in surprise. When he didn't answer, I blinked again. "Why do you ask?" he inquired after a long pause. Because he smelled so bitter, as if he'd never tasted anything sweet. But Father had warned me never to tell anyone about my ability to smell people's scents. So I took out the sweet cake from my robe and, with some reluctance, offered half to him. "I'll treat you to sweet cake. I just had some. It's very sweet. Must have lots of sugar. I hope eating it will make him less bitter." He looked down at the sweet cake in my hand and chuckled. "Lana Shen, you're quite bold." I smiled sweetly. "Thank you for the praise, Your Majesty the Emperor." He was taken aback again. Just then, I heard my mother anxiously calling my name not far away. She must have thought I got lost when she couldn't find me. I'm not that foolish. I shoved the sweet cake into His Majesty the Emperor's arms, hearing him say coldly, "Someone once gave me sweet cake too, but she wished me dead." Huh? I jerked my head up, meeting his ice cold eyes. "What about you?" he asked me. For some reason, he looked both cold and bitter to me, even more pitiful than the drenched little puppy in the courtyard earlier. I stood on tiptoe, wanting to pat his head, but he was too tall, so I ended up giving him a light hug instead. "I wish His Majesty the Emperor a sweet, long life." "Long Lon," Mother's voice drew nearer. I stuck out my tongue, quickly released His Majesty the Emperor, lifted my skirt, and turned to walk back. After a few steps, I remembered there was something I hadn't said. I turned back to look at His Majesty the Emperor, still standing there dazed, and whispered, "That sister lied to you. Don't believe her, because she smells foul, especially when she's doing bad things. The stench is particularly strong." After saying that, I ran off without looking back, so he wouldn't ask how I knew. "How did you know?" His Majesty the Emperor sat on a high chair, leaning forward with his chin propped on one hand to look down at me. "Just moments ago, as my parents were about to take me out of the palace, we were stopped. Then I was brought to this splendid, golden hall. Only His Majesty the Emperor and I were in the hall. I noticed the bitter scent on him hadn't faded and answered evasively, "Your Majesty, didn't you eat the sweet cake?" His Majesty the Emperor's striking eyes flickered as he rose to his feet. As he drew closer, the bitter scent clinging to him grew increasingly potent. "We have heard you are unlike ordinary people," he said, standing before me, his gaze lowered with an emotion I couldn't decipher. Thinking he knew about my ability to detect scents, I nervously swallowed, only to hear him continue. "Yet at the age of coming, of age, your mind remains childlike." So it was about this matter. I breathed a sigh of relief, immediately widening my eyes in protest. I argued, "My tutor says it will awaken soon. Just yesterday, I managed to recite poetry." His Majesty chuckled at my words. Just then, the eunuch who had brought me in earlier hurried into the hall, kneeling at a distance and murmuring softly, "Your Majesty, Lord Shun is kneeling outside the hall, requesting an audience." "My father?" I turned to look at the eunuch. The eunuch kept his head lowered and remained silent. I shifted my gaze back to His Majesty, ignoring the eunuch. He looked only at me, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Your father truly dotes on you." I nodded vigorously, my eyes shining brightly. "Of course, my father is the best father in the whole world." Nalanlin, hearing this, he lowered his head closer to me, calling my name in an extremely soft voice. "So blissful, I have no father. So bitter." As he spoke these words, an intense bitterness seemed to permeate the air around him. "Then, shall I let my father be yours too?" I instinctively comforted him. He froze momentarily, his pupils darkening like ink drops, so deep they seemed capable of swallowing me whole. After a long pause, he finally asked, "Is that allowed?" I nodded. "Of course." He smiled, raising his head to address the eunuch nearby. "Summon Felix Shun. We are most pleased with the tribute Minister Shun presented today." Just as father knelt on the ground, he heard His Majesty the Emperor say this. Your humble servant is honored by your Majesty's grace. That luminous pearl was specially transported from the South Sea. A 1 in 10,000 specimen. Father kowtowed in reply. We were not referring to the luminous pearl. His Majesty glanced sideways at me, a slight smile curling his lips. We meant Minister's treasure daughter. Upon hearing this, Father trembled slightly and lifted his head to look at me. After just one glance, he quickly kowtowed again and said urgently, My daughter is unlike others. Her mind is like a child's, and she acts recklessly. If she offends your Majesty, please punish me instead. His Majesty the Emperor still wore a slight smile, raising his hand to rest on my head. I heard him say, You are too modest, Minister. In my view, your daughter is exceptionally clever. He was the first person to ever call me smart. He must be a good person. Once I dispel the bitterness around him, I'm sure I'll be able to smell his fragrance. Thinking this, I looked at him and smiled. He looked down at me too, gently ruffling my hair with his hand, and said in a soft voice. Lon Lon also said, She wants her father to be my father too. I nodded with a smile, but when I turned to look at Father, I saw his face turn deathly pale as he abruptly kowtowed to the ground again. I deserve death for my crimes. It is my failure in teaching my daughter that led to her speaking nonsense before your Majesty. Please punish me, Father. I hurried over, my eyes welling up at the sight of his bruised forehead. Father, did Lon Lon do something wrong again? As I spoke, I anxiously blew on his temple. Father held me and had me kneel beside him, continuing to address His Majesty the Emperor. My daughter has a childlike mind and speaks without restraint. This is entirely my fault. I beg your Majesty not to blame her. His Majesty the Emperor stepped before us and reached out to help me up. Minister Shun, you are too severe. His Majesty smiled charmingly, his eyes still deep and dark. I find Lon Lon pure and delightful. Her words resonate deeply with me. Rather than punishment, she deserves a reward. Yet, Father reacted as if hearing dreadful news. Collapsing to the ground, it seemed I had done wrong again. After returning from the palace, Father stayed awake all night, and Mother held me with tearful eyes. Mother, I didn't tell His Majesty the Emperor my secret. Nestled in her arms, my own eyes reddened too, but His Majesty clearly said he would reward Father and me. Mother held me even tighter upon hearing this. I know, it's all our fault. I didn't understand why they were at fault until the next morning, when an imperial edict arrived from the palace. His Majesty the Emperor kept his word. The palace attendants carried in several chests of gold, silver, and jewels. After the leading eunuch finished reading the edict, he smiled and said to me, Consort Chun, 3 days from now is an auspicious date, perfect for entering the palace. I looked up at him and blinked. I'm not Consort Chun. My name is Lana Shun. He continued, smiling. You are Consort Chun, personally bestowed by His Majesty. After handing the edict to Father, he led the procession away in grand fashion. Mother, who had held back all night, finally broke down in tears upon seeing the edict. I quietly asked the maidservant beside me, Dottie, what is a Consort Chun? Dottie pouted, her voice trembling. She is one of His Majesty's imperial concubines. I blinked my eyes. Like Father and Mother? Dottie paused, thinking for a moment. More or less. Then why are they crying? I tilted my head toward my parents, wiping Mother's tears with my hand. Mother, don't cry. I'm willing to become His Majesty the Emperor's Consort Chun. Mother cried even harder. Over the next 3 days, several matrons came to our home. Mostly, they came to teach me the etiquette required after entering the palace. Those rituals were intricate and hard to learn. I stumbled through them and only managed to grasp a few. The last matron stood before me for a long time, staring into my eyes, her face flushing pale, then red, over and over. What are marital duties? I widened my eyes, looking at her innocently. She bit her lip and finally said, Young miss, just remember, in bed, you must always obey His Majesty. I nodded. What about other times? Obey then too. Then marital duties aren't so special after all. On the day I entered the palace, both my parents wept. I cried along with them. When His Majesty the Emperor arrived, I was still sniffling. He approached me and asked calmly, "Are you so afraid to become our consort Chun?" I looked up at him with reddened eyes. Today, unlike last time, he wore a bright yellow robe that made his face resemble the jade stone father kept hidden in his study. "Your Majesty, I'm hungry," I stammered between sobs. It was true. I had been busy since morning and only managed to eat 2 pieces of pastry all day. His Majesty hadn't expected this to be the reason for my tears. He paused briefly before chuckling softly. His smile was exceptionally handsome, and his laughter was pleasing to the ear. "Fetch some food," he said, glancing down at me before adding with a curled lip, "Make it sweet." The eunuch guarding the door hurriedly acknowledged the order and rushed away. Soon after, several plates of pastries were brought in. My eyes lit up at the sight. His Majesty the Emperor sat down beside me, watching me eat several pieces of pastry before asking, "Aren't you afraid of me?" I shook my head while nibbling on the cake. He didn't smell unpleasant. Beneath the strong bitterness was a faint, subtle fragrance. It was quite pleasant. "But everyone else is terrified of me," he said with a light laugh. I swallowed what was in my mouth and replied, "That must be because they're bad people." As I spoke, the bitter scent from him drifted into my nose, making me frown slightly despite myself. Perhaps those people feared him because he was too bitter. "Your Majesty, have some too." I held the sweetest cake up to his lips, smiling warmly as I coaxed him. "This one is the sweetest." He glanced down at the sweet cake, a fleeting light shimmering in his dark eyes, before finally parting his lips to take a small bite. Eunuch Lee, standing not far away, widened his eyes in surprise. I waited for His Majesty to swallow before asking eagerly, like seeking praise, "Is it sweet?" His handsome thin lips curved into a smile. "Sweet." I quickly stuffed the rest into his mouth, taking the chance to lean in and inhale deeply. The bitterness seemed, indeed, a little fainter, but only slightly. No matter how much more I fed him after that, there was no further change. Finally, he sighed and glanced at the pastries I'd forced on him, saying somewhat helplessly, "Lana, shun." I was taken aback. "Huh? If you can't finish them, just throw them away. No need to stuff them all into my stomach." With that, he shot a cold glance at Eunuch Lee and ordered, "Take them away, but I'm still hungry." Seizing the moment as Eunuch Lee stepped forward, I quickly grabbed 2 pieces and stuffed them into my mouth. His Majesty the Emperor looked at my bulging cheeks and chuckled softly, reaching out to give one a gentle pinch. At home, did Lord Shin starve you? No, but my mouth was too full to utter a single word in protest. All I could sense was the bitterness from His Majesty's presence, growing just a little fainter again. "I've overeaten, even though I really didn't have that much." His Majesty the Emperor stood up just as I let out my third burp. The matron said that once I entered the palace, my fate would be tied to the Shin family, glory and disgrace shared alike. If I make any mistake, father and mother will be punished. Thinking of this, I quickly covered my mouth, not daring to hiccup again. "I've eaten a bit too much. Accompany me for a walk outside," His Majesty the Emperor said calmly, watching my shoulders tremble as I held back my hiccups. I immediately stood up. "Yes, hic." His Majesty the Emperor pressed his lips lightly, turned, and walked out. Annoyed, I covered my mouth and hurried to follow. Consort Chun's dress was exceptionally intricate, its layered skirts blooming around my feet with every step. It looked even more beautiful than the peonies blooming along the path. Focused on my steps, I didn't notice His Majesty the Emperor suddenly stop ahead. I bumped squarely into his back, losing my balance and stumbling backward. But before I could hit the ground, he turned and caught me by the waist, pulling me back up. A rich bitterness, mingled with faint sandalwood notes, wafted from him. It smelled utterly captivating. He frowned slightly, but before he could speak, I caught a faint foul odor drifting from nearby. Instinctively, I pulled him behind a large rock to hide. "Shuh." Seeing he was about to speak, I quickly pressed my hand over his lips. Soon enough, footsteps grew steadily closer. "You say His Majesty went to Jingha Palace?" A delicate voice rang out, It was the same woman who had spoken with the emperor that day. I crouched behind the rock, cautiously peeking out. The woman wore an ornate palace gown, trailed by a retinue of attendants. The lead maid bowed her head. Yes. I've been in the palace 2 days and haven't even seen His Majesty. That fool just arrived today and already gains his favor. How dare she? The woman angrily snapped a peach branch beside her. The maid whispered, her father is the Minister of Rights, and his most prized student just topped the imperial exams this year. His Majesty likely. Before she could finish, the woman cut her off. Besides Arlie family, who else could possibly be his support? Your Highness, the palace maid quickly glanced around and whispered, choose your words carefully. Their conversation left me utterly bewildered. I only understood that they mentioned my father, and that student he's so fond of. After they walked away, I turned to look at His Majesty the Emperor beside me. He obediently let me cover his mouth, while Eunuch Lee behind him turned pale, as if the sky were falling. I'd messed up again. I quickly released him, my face crestfallen. Your Majesty, could you punish only me and spare my father? He looked down at me, his thin lips curling slightly as he reached up to adjust my crooked hairpin. I won't punish you, he coaxed softly, but could Lon Lon tell me how you knew Stella Lee was coming? And why you called her a bad person? I blinked. He trapped me between himself and the rock. Leaning down slightly, I swallowed hard, slipped out from under his arm, and ran back, holding up my skirt. I'm a bit sleepy. Time for bed. But after I bathed and lay down, His Majesty the Emperor came again, afraid he would continue questioning me. I grabbed the quilt and pulled it over my head. Lon Lon is asleep and knows nothing. After a while, a soft chuckle came from His Majesty beside me. I cautiously pulled down the quilt, revealing only my eyes to look at him. The candlelight behind him flickered, casting his shadow at his feet. He stood with his hands behind his back, leaning slightly forward with a cool smile. Lon Lon is quite the nerve, falling asleep without performing her bedchamber duty. Bedchamber duty? The matron did say that bedchamber duty means accompanying His Majesty the Emperor to sleep. Today was my first time sleeping away from home, and I was originally a bit scared. But if His Majesty the Emperor is willing to sleep with me, I definitely won't be afraid anymore. Thinking this, I shifted inward, making space beside me, and looked at His Majesty the Emperor with sparkling eyes. Lon Lon is timid, so of course I'm willing to perform bedchamber duty for His Majesty the Emperor. His Majesty the Emperor paused for a moment, then the corners of his handsome eyes curved downward. He asked me, does Lon Lon know what bedchamber duty means? Of course I know. Who does he think he's looking down on? The matron said I must obey His Majesty the Emperor's words in bed. So when His Majesty the Emperor said, don't move around, I truly didn't dare to move again. Do you really know what bedchamber duty means? Seeing me remain completely still, His Majesty the Emperor couldn't help but ask me again. I tilted my head and blinked at him. Isn't this bedchamber duty right now? He chuckled softly again, the pleasant scent of agarwood drifting from him. Surprisingly, it didn't smell so bitter anymore. Sleep now, he whispered. I nodded, closed my eyes, then opened them again. Your Majesty the Emperor. May I move now? If I stay completely still, I can't fall asleep. All right. His voice carried a hint of laughter. I breathed a sigh of relief, relaxed my body, and turned to face His Majesty the Emperor. I saw his high nose bridge and the corners of his mouth, suppressing a smile. He really is handsome. Your Majesty. I called out to him again. He didn't open his mouth, only let out a soft hum. What's your name? I rolled over to look at the canopy above, somewhat puzzled. Everyone calls you His Majesty the Emperor, but I'm sure that can't be your real name. Just like how everyone calls my father Minister Shun or Minister Shun of the board. His Majesty the Emperor opened his eyes and joined me in staring at the dark, indistinguishable canopy above. A strong, bitter scent washed over me. I couldn't help but turn my head to look at him, only to see his thin lips part slightly. Cyrus Chi. I didn't catch it clearly. He also turned his head, his cold gaze meeting mine. My name is Cyrus Chi. The tutor hadn't taught me many characters yet, so I didn't know which 2 characters made up Cyrus Chi. but I still pretended to be mature and nodded, patting Cyrus Chee's shoulder in imitation of others. That's a fine name indeed. Cyrus Chee's expression froze for an instant. After a long pause, he removed my hand and said calmly, "Tomorrow, I shall find you a tutor." Huh? Why must I study again? True to his word, Cyrus Chee indeed found me a female tutor the very next day. No sooner had the female tutor finished greeting me than a palace attendant announced that Consort Shu had arrived. "This humble tutor shall begin lessons for your ladyship tomorrow. I beg leave to withdraw for today." Without lingering further, the female tutor bowed and turned to depart. The faint fragrance of her presence dissipated as she left, replaced by a spreading foul odor. Stella Lee led a group of people past the female tutor. Entering the hall, Dottie told me that Stella Lee was the daughter of General of the Northern Defense Leo Lee, and also the niece of the current Empress Dowager. 2 days before I entered the palace, she had been infected as Consort Shu by Cyrus Chee. She too was one of Cyrus Chee's consorts. Why can Cyrus Chee have 2 consorts? I have some free time today, so I thought I'd visit you, sister. I hope you don't mind my intrusion. Stella Lee glanced at the departing female tutor and took a seat on a nearby chair. A foul odor wafted into my nose, and I instinctively rose to leave. Father always said to stay far away from people who smell bad, but before I could go, Stella Lee grabbed my hand. She snapped, "How dare you ignore me?" Fear gripped me, but I couldn't break free from her grasp. I pleaded, "Let me go." "Lana Shun, who do you think you are? Don't think just because the Emperor favors you, you can look down on me." She tightened her grip on my hand and sneered, "Do you really think the Emperor would ever like a fool like you? He's just using your father. Once your father is no longer useful, he'll be the first to kill you and your father." I glared at her, then lowered my head and bit down hard on her wrist. Only after she released me in pain did I pull Dottie back several steps, telling her, "Don't speak ill of His Majesty the Emperor. He would never kill me or father. How dare you bite me?" Enraged, she raised her hand to slap me. I ducked beneath it, then grabbed Dottie and dashed toward the door. "You hurt me first, and on top of that, you insulted His Majesty the Emperor. Serves you right." I stuck out my tongue at her and turned to flee. But the moment I turned, I collided with Cyrus Chee. I hadn't noticed when Cyrus had arrived. I suppose Stella Lee's stench was so overpowering it masked the bitter scent clinging to Cyrus. Consort Shu is truly brilliant. She's even thought ahead on my behalf about what I ought to do in the future. Cyrus shielded me in his arms, glancing at Stella Lee in the hall with an amused, mocking smile. Stella Lee's face turned deathly pale, and she immediately dropped to her knees. "Your servant." "That's not what I meant," she said with a slight tremble in her shoulders, lifting her head with tear-reddened eyes in a delicate manner. "It's just that since I entered the palace days ago, Your Majesty has yet to visit my quarters." Cyrus Chee didn't respond, merely holding me as we walked further inside. As we passed by her, I couldn't help but pinch my nose. Cyrus Chee asked me, "What's wrong?" I answered without thinking, "She smells a bit." No sooner had the words left my mouth than Stella Lee on the ground turned even paler, her face a mask of disbelief. Cyrus Chee, however, seemed to find it amusing, letting out a light chuckle before telling Stella Lee, "Now you know why I haven't visited you." Stella Lee stumbled her way out of Jingha Palace. After she left, Cyrus Chee released me. "You're quite sharp. Who knows how long she'll be scrubbing herself after this." But I didn't feel happy just because he praised me. "Cyrus Chee, why do you have 2 consorts?" I stepped back a few paces, hands on my hips as I questioned him. He seemed taken aback by my sudden question. Pausing for a moment, Dottie tugged gently at my clothes from behind, trying to caution me about my words. I had completely forgotten father and the matron's teachings, feeling only that I had been deceived. Then, Lon, how many consorts do you think I should have?" Cyrus Chee's voice was light and clear, tinged with a hint of laughter. Very pleasant to hear. I liked him very much. I liked his appearance, liked his voice, and also liked the faint scent of sandalwood about him. That was why I was willing to become his consort Chun. Thinking of this, I grew even angrier. Naturally, just one. I lifted my head and glared at him. Father has only mother as his wife. So why can you have two? Hearing this, he laughed again, but seeing the fury on my face, he quickly suppressed his smile. I am not the same as your father, he explained. I didn't understand. Why are you not the same? He walked over,
wrapped an arm around my waist,
and sat me down on the couch. I am the Emperor. The Emperor is different from everyone else. I was even more confused, sitting in his lap and forgetting to be angry. Isn't the Emperor the most powerful person in the world, free to do as he pleases? He sighed. Cyrus Chi, are you unhappy? I noticed the bitterness around him grew stronger again. From yesterday until today, I've been thinking a lot. It seems the bitterness around Cyrus Chi isn't related to whether he eats sweets or not. Whenever he smiles, the bitterness fades a little. So perhaps he's so bitter because he's unhappy. He didn't answer my question, just picked up a strand of my hair and twirled it around his finger, asking, Stella, Lee said, I'm using your father. Aren't you angry? I shook my head. That day, I said I'd like Daddy to be your daddy too. He dote on you just like he dotes on me. If it's something good for you, Daddy would surely be willing to do it. That doesn't count as using. I turned and rested my head on his shoulder, sniffing his scent, and said softly, besides, you're a good person. You wouldn't kill me or my daddy. You're the first person to ever call me a good person. Cyrus Chi twisted the strand of hair in his hand, his voice somewhat low. That's because they can't smell your scent. I patted his back. Then I'll tell you every day from now on. Good. The bitterness faded a little more. Satisfied, I released him and asked, can the Emperor really not have just one consort? He chuckled. Not for now. Angrily, I jumped off him and shoved him out. I heard Stella Lee spent 2 hours bathing after returning that day. Afterward, she not only hunted for perfumes and scented oils everywhere, but also bathed 3 times daily. Morning, noon, and night. Dottie was all smiles while telling me this. Your Highness truly does nothing by halves. When you strike, it's with a thunderclap. I just heard that phrase from the female tutor. It roughly means she's praising my prowess. Beaming with pride, I accepted her compliment. But Your Highness, you and His Majesty have been at odds for days now. Dottie started coaxing me again. What if you wear out his good temper? These past days, Cyrus Chi sent many rare curios to me, but I refused them all. I flopped onto the bed in a huff, pulling the covers over my head. Fine, I won't be his consort Chun anymore. After all, he still has consort Shu. Who knows? There might be other consorts in the future. Besides, the female tutor said the mistress of the harem is the empress. With so many consorts around, Cyrus Chi is truly a super, invincible scoundrel. Seeing my furious expression, Dottie said nothing more, just tucked me in and withdrew. Perhaps because I was too angry, I had a terrifying nightmare that night. Waking with a start, I felt utterly terrified. Clutching my pillow, I went out but couldn't find Dottie. So I ended up running to Cyrus Chi's palace. His bedchamber was quite close to mine, and eunuchly, guarding the door, came forward to greet me. Consort Chun, what brings you here at this hour? The hall was dark. Cyrus Chi had already retired for the night. I'm here for bedchamber duty. Half asleep and hugging my pillow, I made to enter. Eunuchly snapped back to attention and quickly stopped me, looking troubled. Your Highness, bedchamber duty requires His Majesty summons. But I'm afraid to sleep alone. Just as I was about to speak, a foul odor drifted out from the hall. My drowsiness vanished instantly. I pushed eunuchly aside and charged in. Cyrus Chi, there's a bad person, I shouted loudly. At that moment, the figure standing by the bed raised the sword in hand and thrust it toward the bed. I only had time to hurl the pillow I was holding at them. The pillow struck the person, but it still didn't stop their sword from plunging into the quilt. Cyrus Chi, I began to cry. Back when I learned needlework, even a prick from a needle hurt my hand terribly. A sword this long, who knows how much it would hurt piercing Cyrus Chi. The person by the bed glanced down at my pillow, cursed under their breath, then pulled out the sword and thrust it toward me. Terrified, I stumbled back 2 steps but tripped over the threshold. Before I could hit the ground, a dark figure swept over from the side and pulled me into their arms. He covered my eyes with one hand while throwing a dagger with the other. I only heard someone grunt, followed by something heavy hitting the ground. Drag him away. Cyrus Chee's icy voice rang above my head. I joyfully pried the hand from my eyes and looked up. It was indeed Cyrus Chee's handsome face. Eunuch Lee stood nearby, bowing respectfully. Your Majesty, Consort Chun requests to perform bedchamber duty. Cyrus Chee raised an eyebrow. He asked me, not angry anymore, puffing my cheeks. I wriggled out of his embrace and silently inspected him from all sides. Only after confirming he hadn't been pierced by swords did I burst into tears again. He seemed startled, his cold fingers frantically wiping my tears. Did it scare you? If you'd slept in my chambers tonight, wouldn't you have avoided these villains? I asked him through tear-filled eyes. Eunuch Lee silently withdrew, gently closing the palace doors. The cool moonlight streamed through the half-open window, spilling entirely into Cyrus Chee's eyes. His originally dark, lightless pupils now seemed sprinkled with scattered stardust. Lana Shun, he pulled me into his embrace, his hand stroking my head repeatedly. Only now do I understand that this world isn't entirely filled with demons and ghouls, schemes and treachery. I sniffled. What are demons and ghouls? He chuckled softly. The rich scent of agarwood permeated the air around us. It smelled utterly captivating. You needn't know. Just understand that you're different from everyone else. I pushed him away and asked again, then can you have only me as your consort? After a moment's contemplation, he replied, not for now, you big jerk. Cyrus Chee was rather busy. I was very busy too. Every day, I had to study reading and writing with my female tutor, and be surrounded by imperial physicians for acupuncture and bitter medicines. Perhaps from drinking too many medications, I'd recently become less able to detect the bitter scent that always clung to Cyrus Chee. Dottie, take a sniff. Have I turned bitter too? I frowned at the bowl of medicine Dottie brought me, thinking I was refusing the medicine. Dottie persuaded earnestly. Your Highness, His Majesty only has your best interests at heart. Didn't you say yourself that memorizing texts has felt easier lately? Yes, this is all medicine to treat a dull mind. What the imperial physicians said wasn't much different from what the doctor father hired told me. It all boils down to my mother having a difficult birth with me, coupled with being confined at home for over a decade, leaving me with a childlike mind and mental stagnation. No one wants to be a fool. I braced myself, pinched my nose, and drank the entire bowl, just as I popped a candied fruit into my mouth. A palace maid hurried in. Your Highness, the Empress Dowager emerged from the prayer hall yesterday and requests your presence at Sinang Palace to pay respects. Dottie explained that the Empress Dowager is Cyrus Chee's mother. She maintains a vegetarian diet and devotes herself to Buddhist prayers, spending half of each month in seclusion at the prayer hall. My father is Cyrus Chee's father. Naturally, Cyrus Chee's mother is also my mother. I quickly had Dottie pick out a beautiful dress for me to change into, freshened up, and then followed the palace attendant to Sinang Palace. So you are Consort Chun, the Empress Dowager, with a kindly expression, sat on the couch and smiled at me. I performed the proper etiquette, but before I could speak, I caught an indescribable foul odor. It was coming from the Empress Dowager. Her Majesty is asking you a question. How dare you not answer? Stella Lee, standing nearby, snapped sharply upon seeing this. The stench from her mixed with the odor from the Empress Dowager filled the hall, making me feel quite uncomfortable. But on the way here, Dottie had reminded me repeatedly about the rules, fearing I might make another mistake. I had thought that since the Empress Dowager is Cyrus Chee's mother, she would surely be just like him. But now it seems that is not the case. I said softly, in reply to your Majesty, this humble consort is Consort Chun, such a lovely child. No wonder the Emperor favors you. The Empress Dowager smiled warmly. Come sit by my side. I glanced up at her, then at Stella Lee's resentful expression. Both are wicked, yet so different in demeanor. Obediently, I took a seat beside the Empress Dowager. She took my hand and said to Stella Lee, "You may withdraw for now." Stella Lee shot me a glare, her face full of reluctance, but she curtsied and departed. After she left, the Empress Dowager asked me, "Tell me, do you care for the Emperor?" "Of course I do." Seeing me nod, she continued, "I heard you were present during the assassination attempt on him recently. It must have been terrifying." I shook my head. I spent half a month in the prayer hall, and when I emerged, the Emperor had grown noticeably thinner. As she spoke, she raised a hand, and a palace attendant brought forth a small vial. "You may not know this, but the Emperor was not raised by my side, and he holds some misunderstandings toward me," she said sorrowfully. "Seeing you by his side brings me great comfort. This is the medicine I found to treat his heart ailment, but he refuses to take it. Could you help me find a way to make him consume it?" I glanced at the small porcelain vial. "His Majesty has a heart ailment?" I asked. She nodded. "Since childhood, every episode brings excruciating pain. Without this medicine, he may not live many more years. I've no other choice but to seek your help." "Not many more years to live?" My eyes widened in shock. "He despises me, so he rejects anything from me. You must not tell him this came from me." Cyrus Chi came to me after I had already lain down. Seeing him approach, I shifted inward to make space for him. He sat at the bedside and asked, "You visited the Empress Dowager today?" I sat up on the bed. "Cyrus, the Empress Dowager says you have a heart ailment. She's a bad person. I fear she might be deceiving me." He paused, then nodded under my anxious gaze. "Does it hurt?" I crawled closer to him, reaching out to pat his chest all over. It felt firm, nothing like mine at all. Amused, he caught my hand and gently pulled me into his embrace. "Blow on it for me, Lon Lon, and it won't hurt anymore." His eyes curved into smiles, much more handsome than when I first met him. I nodded, found a comfortable spot in his arms, and began blowing gently on his chest. After just 2 breaths, he raised his hand to cover my mouth. Before I could react, he flipped over and laid me back on the bed. His gaze was deep, the corners of his eyes carrying a tenderness like warm sun melting snow, his prominent atoms apple-bobbing once. "Does it not hurt anymore?" I asked vaguely. He quickly released his hand and sat up on the bed. After a long moment, he finally sighed. The scent of sandalwood was strong on him, mixed with a hint of sweetness. "Lon Lon," his voice, for some reason, carried a slight hoarseness. "Have you been taking your medicine properly lately? Just thinking about this makes me angry. Do you think I'm too stupid?" I asked him, puffing out my cheeks in irritation. He looked down at me, let out a seemingly helpless laugh, and gently traced my brows with his finger. "Lon Lon isn't stupid, but I hope you can grow up quickly." "Nonsense. I've already come of age." Just as I scrambled up to properly argue with him, my eyes caught the small porcelain bottle I'd hidden at the corner of the bed. I almost forgot the important matter. "With your heart ailment, won't you only have a few years left if you don't take medicine?" I stared at him and asked seriously. He didn't expect me to bring this up again and was momentarily at a loss for words. I peeked around to make sure we were alone in the hall before retrieving the small bottle from the bed corner and handing it to him. "Take a look. Can this medicine cure your heart ailment?" He took the bottle, opened it, and smelled its contents. "It can," he said quietly. I was taken aback. Had I wronged the Empress Dowager? But with an added dose of poison, he'd die before the heart ailment could heal. He looked up at me. "Did you get it from the Empress Dowager?" I nodded, my face full of anger. I knew it. She must be a villain. The bitterness that had just escaped him dissipated upon seeing my expression, and he laughed. "How did you know?" "Of course I smelled it, but I can't say that. Cyrus Chi. She's your mother. How could she be so wicked? I'm truly furious. Even if I get pricked by a needle on an ordinary day, my mother would be heartbroken. Why would Cyrus Chi's mother feed him poison that could kill him?" Cyrus Chi let out a cold laugh. This time, the bitterness emanating from him was overwhelmingly intense, so bitter that I couldn't help but hug him, gently patting his back. "It's all right, Cyrus Chi. My mother will surely care for you. I comforted him tenderly. I'll care for you too. Only now do I understand. His bitterness isn't from lacking sweets, nor from unhappiness. We lay together on the bed, neither of us speaking another word. I could only smell the bitterness emanating from him, enveloping his entire being. I've been motherless since childhood. I don't know how long passed before I heard him speak. I turned my head to look at him. His eyes were open, staring blankly into the void. His dark pupils were especially cold in the night. Back then, she caught the emperor's eye and was forcibly taken into the palace. Just once, and she had me. She hated me, abandoned me in the cold palace. The emperor hated me too, neglected me entirely. His voice was low and hoarse. In the 3rd year, they had another child. That one was coddled from infancy, praised by all as the crown prince, the person she was willing to turn me into a blade to protect. We're both her children. So why am I the trampled ant, while he sits high above, waiting only to ascend the throne? Since I am the cruel and tyrannical prince of Yen, the rebel everyone wants dead, then I covered his mouth. Too bitter, bitterer than all the medicines I've ever taken combined. I have candied fruit to sweeten the taste, but he has none. I couldn't resist leaning in and kissing his flushed temple. He trembled slightly, looking at me in disbelief. I tilted my head to study him. You are His Majesty the Emperor, wise and mighty. Earlier this year, I heard servants say there are far fewer beggars on the streets now. I'm certain it's all you're doing. I've finally learned the character evil. When the female tutor taught me, she didn't explain much about it, perhaps because she knew it was part of Cyrus Chi's name and dared not elaborate. Yet I've grown quite fond of this character. I filled an entire page writing Cyrus Chi's name. Just as I was admiring my masterpiece, Cyrus Chi entered. Before he appeared, his scent of agarwood filled the room, mingled with a hint of sweetness. Cyrus, look, I proudly showed him my writing. This is the best character I've ever written. Just 2 days ago, he said my handwriting looked like ants had crawled across the page. Today will surely astonish him. His eyes indeed lit up, and he laughed. In this world, the only person who dares to call me by my name directly and fill an entire page with it is probably you. I took the opportunity to sit on his lap and place the paper on the desk. So, this is the character Fori. I knew it was a good name. I like it very much. He glanced at the character. Because it's easy to write, just a few strokes, indeed much simpler to write than other characters like Evil, Russia, or Hubei. Feeling a bit guilty, I feigned composure. That's not at all. He didn't expose me further. Instead, he picked up a brush and wrote several more Lana Shun in the gaps on the paper, filling the entire page to the brim. I was utterly pleased, even considering finding a place to hang it up. Your Majesty, Lord Shun has arrived. Eunuch Li entered from outside, glanced up at me, his expression softening. Madame Shun is here as well. This was the first time Mother had come to see me since I entered the palace. Cyrus Chi went to the imperial study to meet with Father, while Mother was escorted by the palace attendants into Jingha Palace. Lan, Mother's eyes welled up the moment she saw me. She took my hands and looked me over carefully. Have you suffered any grievances in the palace? I nodded. Mother's eyes reddened further. Was it His Majesty? It was him. I pulled Mother to sit down, pouting angrily. He said he can't have only me as his consort for now, and claimed he's different from Father. Mother, please talk some sense into him. Mother's hands trembled slightly, the worry in her eyes fading considerably. Besides, he always comes very late for bedchamber duty. Sometimes I'm already asleep when he arrives. Also, his medicine isn't bitter anymore, but what he feeds me is always bitter, and he lies saying it's not. I poured out all his offenses in one breath. The more Mother listened, the more something seemed off. Finally, she gave me another look and remarked cryptically, "No wonder you rounded out a bit. I'm not that plump. I've been giving half of my daily pastries and sweet cakes to Cyrus Chi. Instead of sympathizing, Mother actually advised me before leaving, be kinder to His Majesty. I had a strange feeling. Mother seemed to care for Cyrus Chi even more deeply. When I told Cyrus Chi about this, he laughed for a long time. Finally, He held me close and whispered softly, "Lan Lan, I can't wait any longer. The play must begin." Cyrus Chi fell ill. The imperial physician said it somewhat resembled a worsening heart ailment, yet also bore signs of poisoning. I kept vigil by Cyrus Chi's bedside for days, crying until my eyes ran dry. The imperial physician could devise no method to save him. Even more anxious than I was Stella Lee, who not only sought out doctors from among the common folk, but even summoned Taoist priests to perform rituals. Yet despite exhausting every possible remedy, Cyrus Chi did not awaken. She, however, was dragged into the cold palace by a single decree from the Empress Dowager for believing in witchcraft. That night, the imperial physicians withdrew from the hall. All the palace servants waited outside the hall, leaving only Cyrus Chi and me inside. The wind howled fiercely beyond the window. The Empress Dowager stepped in slowly. She still wore a benevolent expression, the marks of time adding a touch of kindness to her strikingly beautiful face. The day had finally come. She stood bathed in candlelight, her voice as withered and hoarse as the flickering flame. I turned my head to look at her. "Was the medicine you gave him poisoned? Everyone says you're simple-minded, a fool." She took a few steps forward, gazing at me with a haunting intensity. "Yet no one expected that only your pure heart could make him let his guard down. Do you really think that just because you didn't give him the medicine, everything would be fine?" She laughed, the kindness on her face cracking to reveal a trace of malice. "You've stirred greed in him. With you by his side, he clings harder to life. Where there is desire, there is vulnerability." I collapsed to the floor. "Why would you do this to him? He's your child too." "He is not," she snapped sharply. "He is misfortune, a disgrace, heaven's punishment upon me." Tears, I thought, had long dried, welled up again, and I hurriedly covered the ears of the person lying in bed. But the thick, bitter scent still emerged. Cyrus Chi opened his eyes, his thin, pale lips moving slightly. "So you want to kill me?" The Empress Dowager, caught off guard by this turn of events, stumbled back 2 steps in fright. "You!" Cyrus Chi sat up, his gaze cold as it fell upon her. "So after I earned father's praise just once, you gave me a poisoned sweet cake? So after I cleared all obstacles for Colchi, you had him target me first upon taking the throne?" The Empress Dowager pointed at him furiously. "How dare you speak of Cole?" Cyrus Chi laughed. My heart ached as I looked at him, noticing his red, rimmed eyes, as if they could bleed. "Did you really think you hit it well?" His voice was like the chill of deep winter. "Did you think the Lee family wouldn't show some sincerity when Stella Lee entered the palace?" The Empress Dowager froze, then seemed to realize something. "What have you done? You watched me day and night, wishing for my early death. But did you forget what kind of scum your maternal family is?" He spoke each word deliberately, for the title of Empress. "The Lee family would do anything. Have you forgotten how you entered the palace back then? What have you done to my Yenner?" The Empress Dowager murmured in disbelief, turning to leave. Cyrus Chi smiled. Naturally, like his father, he accidentally fell into the lake. Drowned. Hearing this, the Empress Dowager collapsed to the ground, staring blankly at Cyrus Chi. "You demon, I should have strangled you back then. Compared to Mother Empress, your son is still a step behind." The Lee family, for conspiring against the late Crown Prince's orphan, was sentenced to clan extermination. The Empress Dowager, misled by treacherous advisors to plot against the emperor, was placed under lifelong house arrest in the Buddhist hall. This move, my female tutor just taught me, a drastic solution. All this trouble made our Lon Lon shed so many tears. She's visibly thinner now. Cyrus Chi held me heart-achingly in his arms, his large hand gently squeezing my waist. I nodded pretentiously. "Then you have to make up to me." "What does Lun Lun want?" I thought for a moment. "I want you to have only me as your consort." "Good." He finally gave a different answer than before, not as a consort, but as Empress. In high spirits, I patted his shoulder. "Then today, I grant you the bedchamber duty." His eyes darkened slightly. Dottie and Uniquely nearby pressed their lips together and lowered their heads. "Lon Lon, do you really know what bedchamber duty means. After a long while, Cyrus Chi asked me again. Of course I know. Isn't it just sleeping? This sleeping is not that sleeping. The female tutor blushed, coughed several times, then handed me a few booklets. The booklets were filled with images of men and women intertwined, doing who knows what. Seeing my eager, inquisitive gaze, the female tutor's ears turned red as well. Tell His Majesty, I truly cannot teach this anymore. With that, she fled Jingha Palace, as if flying. If even the female tutor couldn't teach it, it must be quite complex indeed. This only deepened my fascination with these booklets. So much so that I didn't even notice when Cyrus Chi arrived. Cyrus Chi took the booklet from my hand, his beautiful eyes like pools brimming with spring water, and with his sweet scent enveloping me, I suddenly felt parched. Lon Lon, you don't understand? Let me teach you. His voice was like falling feathers, brushing against my heart. I felt an inexplicable restlessness. Seeing my ears flush red, Cyrus Chi chuckled softly. It seems Lon Lon has grown up. This night was unlike any before. The candlelight flickered gently, casting shadows on the scattered clothes on the floor. I felt as though I had been tossed into the clouds, not knowing how long it lasted before it finally stopped. In a daze, I held Cyrus Chi and murmured, Cyrus, you're finally not bitter anymore. What do you mean, not bitter? The taste. Good people are fragrant, bad people are foul. But you, Cyrus, were bitter. Cyrus Chi buried his face in the crook of my neck. After a very, very long time, just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard him whisper, because Lon Lon is sweet. It was like a piece of melting candy, wrapping all the bitterness in sweetness.